Okay, so first, in listening to the teachings, we should, all of you and I myself, should give rise to this an attitude that we will take part in the teachings in order to put the teachings into practice and thereby attaining our goal that we desire and yearn for all beings, that is to say, enlightenment. And we do so out of compassion for all sentient beings throughout space. So with a very open, big mind, and a big mind that has the content of being densely inhabited, populated by sentient beings who have been, over the course of samsara, many lifetimes, have acted as our kind benefactors and parents and mother. And so we have not just all sentient beings, but all sentient beings who have been our most intimate helper, our most intimate caregiver has been our mother. And all beings have been a mother at one time or another, many times. So for their sake, then, we listen to the teachings. We have come to the 5th chapter, introspection, which, coupled with the previous chapter of heedfulness or carefulness, heedfulness really, constitute the three skills, the three qualities that can, for human beings like us, can basically arise and become useful out of, how do we say, not out of nothingness in any profound sense, but nothingness meaning we're not careful, we have no mindfulness, and we lack any form of introspection. But when we have this precious human birth, we can develop those just by hearing their value and by practicing, particularly according to these two chapters of the Bodhicharyavatara, the conduct of the Bodhisattva. And so we need to then review and really practice all these different sections, the various verses. Right now, we've covered how to practice giving up, avoiding negative actions, which is, in summary, noticing, being mindful and introspective as far as our body, speech, and mind in regards to the kleshas, our afflictions, our mental afflictions. So there was a long discussion on what they are and how to recognize them, and then how to overcome them. And then following that is the discipline of practicing virtue. And now we are in the section on the discipline of working for the benefit of beings. And a bodhisattva works for the benefit of beings by one way, of course, the conduct of the bodhisattva is very vast. It's as infinite as there are. It's as infinite as sentient beings. But in a direct way, there's what's called drawing beings to that the bodhisattva draws beings in to the Dharma, and they do that by through material offerings. Like if you go to see and if you go to visit a Lama, say, or a master of the Mahayana, then he may offer you tea and some cookies or something like that, make you feel comfortable and welcomed and like that. And then in these chapters we were discussing last time, then there was specifically the verses regarding how to draw beings to the Dharma with material offerings. And then offering material Dharma, offering material substances, and through through kind words, through words that are meaningful and kind. And so Shantideva also talked about those points of speech following the material offerings. And then there was then the teacher can offer the Dharma based on their understanding of the capacity and temperament of the disciple. And of course, the fourth quality of drawing others in is that the master or the teacher, a teacher's conduct should match their words. And so this is what's called the four means of drawing beings to the Dharma. And that's one way to sort of categorize a bodhisattva conduct. And so that's what we discussed last time. And now we are on verse 91 of the 5th chapter. And this section, these 5 have to do with not one of the big responsibilities of the bodhisattva and all the precepts, the root downfalls and the branch downfalls of the bodhisattva and so forth. There's a big emphasis, as was mentioned in the very first chapter of this text, how harmful it is for someone to harbor negative attitude or negative thoughts towards a bodhisattva. And it was very vividly expressed in the first chapter. And of course, that's from the point of view of karma, that a being who, disparages or disrespects or rejects a bodhisattva, they're karmically, it's very troublesome karmically. But from the point of view of the Bodhisattva, that Bodhisattva would never, any contact someone has with a Bodhisattva will ensure their ultimate or their eventual release from samsara, from conditioning, the conditioning factors of samsara. So from the point of view of karma, it's not good to do things as a bodhisattva that would cause beings to develop a bad attitude towards one. And so these next verses are kind of, they're ways to avoid being offensive to others as part of the discipline of the bodhisattva. So verse 91, for instance, says, when you spit and throw away your toothsticks, you should cover them. I don't know. I'll read this section, okay? And then, and it's wrong to foul with urine and with other filth the fields and water fit for public use. So basically, of course, in Shantideva's time, and even these days in India, then people, every morning you see people walking around chewing on these sticks that are about that big around and about 6 inches long, and they're neem sticks, and they chew on them, and it makes the end of them all kind of wet and fluffy, like a brush. And then they brush their teeth with them and chew on them and brush their teeth. It's a whole big Indian thing, South Indian thing. And then they throw them away. And so it's kind of, here he's saying you shouldn't do that. You shouldn't you shouldn't throw them away like that. You should bury them or put them or cover them, whatever that might mean. But that's in that context. That's the context for it. Of course, urinating in fields and water fit for public use. Basically, a bodhisattva should observe what we would consider to be our standard rules of sanitation, like urinating on the side of buildings and things like that. We shouldn't do that. Then here about eating. When eating, do not gobble noisily, nor stuff and cram your gaping mouth, and do not sit with legs outstretched, nor coarsely rub your hands together. Of course, in Asia, mostly, and we've sort of become kind of converted or been brainwashed to thinking that putting your feet out towards, say, the teacher is impolite. It's quite impolite. Also, stepping over someone is also along the same lines considered to be inappropriate. Just anyone. Rubbing your hands together, I couldn't really find any. I think in India they make a big deal out of washing their hands like basically like we do, I think. But in the Vinaya, I think there's some method that monks wash one hand at a time, something like that. Then it says here, 93, don't sit or do not travel, sit, or stay alone with women of another house. Of course, this is 7th century monastic audience. And so if you are a monk, then you shouldn't be alone. In a commentary, it says you shouldn't ride a horse with a woman, or you shouldn't close the door and be in a room with a woman. Not so much. That's not saying anything about the woman or the man, or vice versa if it was a nun. then you wouldn't be in a room alone or this way alone with a man. Of course, here another house basically means a relative, someone not related to you. And again, it has to do, or like if you're a monk in retreat, it wouldn't be appropriate to have a nun as your attendant, nor would it be for a layman to have a lay person, a lay woman or a lay man. It wouldn't be appropriate to have a attendant who is of the opposite sex, I guess we say. And again, that has to do with not the integrity of the people involved, but of avoiding scandal or avoiding gossip, avoiding people's developing wrong views based on their own projections of their kleshas. So the point here is to avoid doing things that others would perceive as being offensive or causing others to lose faith. And all that you have seen or have been told to be a cause of scandal, that you should avoid. Basically, and we've seen a lot of that, I think, in all the Buddhist community. Just speaking from the Buddhists, other religions and so forth, I can't speak about, but certainly there's been a lot of scandals ever since, right from day one of Buddhism coming to the West. And I've heard from those who would know that scandals have always been a problem in Buddhism. But the message here is that we should learn the customs of wherever it is we go, and then follow those customs so that others will not lose faith or confidence in the Bodhisattva, and particularly in the Dharma that they follow. All of the 250 some rules of the Vinaya for fully ordained men and women scandals, scandals. And I think there were 6 monks, Buddha Shakyamuni's disciples, who were notorious for being the most, I guess they were most rascals of Buddha's disciples. I forget their names at this point, and they people always complained about them in the community, because when you go begging every day, people have to feel that by giving offerings to you, that you are a worthy recipient of their offerings, because they're giving it in order to gather merit, to basically to increase to increase their lot in life, ordinary people. And so people would come to Shakyamuni and complain about this one doing that one doing this, probably somebody always throwing their toothsticks around or these kind of things. And then Buddha would then say, oh, okay, then we'll make a rule. We can't do that anymore. Even though during the monsoon, the people in the village complained, oh, if you disciples of Shakyamuni, you're supposed to be all practicing love and compassion, but you walk around begging in the monsoon season, and all the worms and the insects and all these the vermin that rise up with the water levels in the ground get pressure, stepped on and crushed. And so how can you do that? So then they complained to Buddha, and then Buddha said, okay, now for 3 months, nobody goes outside anymore. We don't do our begging rounds during the rainy season. And so there began the institution of the rainy retreat, which is practiced in the Tibetan tradition and also in the Thai and all the Southeast Asian traditions. That's my understanding of it. I know it is in the Thai places that the rainy 3-month retreat is a big part of their practice calendar. So it's like that. That was a reaction to avoiding being offensive to the culture bearers, to the people. So that's the idea here. Not rudely pointing with your finger, but rather with a reverent gesture, showing with the whole right hand outstretched, this is how to indicate the road or indicate anything. So it was considered to be, pointing was not polite. I think in Asia, you put your left hand under your right elbow, and then with your palm up, you point and point to a statue, you point to a painting, or point to books, or point to people this way. That's the most respectful or the most accepted method of not respected. It's the most polite way. Of course, Tibetans, I don't know. They're very big with their chin. They show go that way, this way, So I know it really has to do with whatever's considered to be impolite. Avoid. Don't wave your arms around in uncouth gestures. Express yourself instead with unobtrusive signs, with gentle snaps and finger snaps, for acting otherwise is impolite excess. Even like it's considered to be very impolite, or I don't know if it's forbidden, but it's like in monasteries in Asia to call out to somebody across the way, across the room. You don't yell to people, don't call out somebody if you want their attention, but you, of course, in Tibet, they use the finger snaps. Here, it doesn't seem to be as considered to be as polite. I don't know, there's something that's sort of being very kind of officious for some reason. Snapping fingers is not particularly considered to be polite. But we don't want people to lose respect for, maybe we don't care about how people feel about us, but we should feel that people associate our approach to life as being informed by the teachings of Buddha Shakyamuni. And so we should consider what we do to be a reflection of the tradition of Buddha Shakyamuni. And causing people to reject the Dharma is a very karmically heavy occurrence. And so we should make every effort we can that others don't lose respect for oneself, for your practice, and for the Dharma that you follow. So that's the idea of those verses there, those 5 verses, basically. Learn the culture. Then 96 has to do with another action that we do, which is we lie down and go to sleep. And so Shantideva, I have to, so he says, lie down to sleep in the preferred direction in the posture of the Buddha when he passed into nirvana. So when the Buddha passed away in Kushinagar, he lay down between 2 sal trees on his right side with his head facing north and his head and his face facing to the west, with his right hand under his cheek and his left leg bent on top of his right leg, bent slightly. So that's the formula of how Buddha passed away into this life, how he died. And that's been subsequently called the lion posture, the lion posture. So one point of doing that is to let that posture bring about a recollection of the Buddha, which is one of the practices of the Bodhisattva, which is to recall the Buddha. It says, recall the Buddha 6 times during the day and 6 times during the night in a strict scriptural teachings. So we should always recall the Buddha. And so in this way, this may instill in us the recollection of the Buddha if we lay down to sleep in the posture that the Buddha lay down to pass away in. And then also recalling the Buddha, we should recall the Buddha's qualities of love and compassion and wisdom, and feel protected and loved by those qualities, by the Buddha, so that our body and our speech and our mind will be able to relax and be at ease, and also inspire us to practice virtue, both in our dreams and in our the rest of our life. And first, with vigilance, decide that you'll be quick to rise again. And so when we do lay down to go to sleep, since it very much mimics death, the same sort of collapse of our senses and our sense consciousnesses occurs. And of course, with sleep, it's temporary, more superficial. We're still breathing, and we still have life force to support those senses and consciousnesses. But when we do lay down and to sleep, we should contemplate the concept of death, contemplate death, that we might die in our sleep tonight. I don't think any of us know someone who we could call up before we go to sleep and assure us 100% that we will wake up the next morning. I don't know if there is such wisdom that if somebody knows that, please text me that number. That we might die sleeping. There's no certainty. And with that understanding of the truth of impermanence, then we should also recollect any negative actions that we've performed, any bad conduct that we've engaged in during the day and previously in our lives, and then renounce that conduct, kind of uproot the conduct itself and the causes for it, that I never ever will ever again act in such a negative way. In Khenpo Ngakchung's commentary to Words of My Perfect Teacher, I believe, he says that when we lay down to go to sleep, or when we confess like this, we should go through all 10 non-virtuous actions of body, speech, and mind as a determination, kind of as when we go to sleep, we should have a determination. Like it says, here it says, Shantideva says, with vigilance decide, meaning we should be determined. And so he taught how we should say, like for the first killing, that I will never kill in my dreams. And tonight, I will never kill, not may I, but he says, I will never kill in my dreams tonight. I will never ask someone else to kill in my dreams. And I will never rejoice in someone being killed. These are 3 points. And tomorrow, I will never kill, and I will never ask anyone to kill anyone, and I will never rejoice in hearing someone being killed. And in the future, my future life, I will never kill, I will never ask someone to kill, and I will never rejoice in hearing someone being killed. And so he would go through these 3 aspects of each of the 10 non-virtuous actions for that dream that night and the next day and in the future. All 3. The next one, I won't steal in my life, and so forth. So this is how we can go and lie down to sleep. And then subsequent to that, then we should also recall our virtue, how we have helped, how and who we have helped during the day or in the past and dedicate that virtue to the enlightenment of all Buddhas, to the enlightenment of all beings. Give that virtue of benefiting others away, and then develop a very joyful attitude at being able to recollect impermanence, at being able to purify karma, at being able to have the capacity, the means and the skill to benefit others, and rejoice in being able to dedicate that. So have a very great feeling of rejoicing. And then develop a great trust in the Buddha, that whatever may happen, that I will always trust the Buddha, both now and in the future. So this is one point of practicing. Another point, of course, is that, as Shantideva says here, with vigilance, decide, in other words, be determined when you go to sleep at night, that you'll rise up quickly, not just, and begin practicing. So make a determination that that's how you will, what do you say, when your consciousness surfaces in the morning, that you will grab it and begin training your mind in bodhicitta first, as soon as you can. But this actually works. Even I know, you may be ones who get up because you know if you have to do something at a certain time, then you automatically wake up. So making suggestions when you go to sleep at night is a very important time of becoming a determined beginning bodhisattva. And then also there is the practice of visualizing the Buddha in your heart, either the Buddha, Shakyamuni, or your own favored Vajrayana deity, whoever you trust embodies the wisdom and compassion of enlightened mind. So you visualize that Buddha in your heart, and think that the light rays of love and compassion and wisdom radiate out, dissolving your bed, you're dissolving your room, all that love and compassion of all of the Buddhas embodied by that, your Yidam, the deity in your heart, radiates out and dissolves the whole universe into light. And all the beings in that universe also dissolve into the effulgence of that wisdom and compassion, and then go to sleep. Another, along the same theme, there's a teaching on regarding your day as being like the stages of your life. Like when you wake up in the morning, it's like when you're born. And then as you stumble into the bathroom or into the kitchen or whatever your habit is, think of it as you're a toddler. And so on. And then midday, you are at the peak of your life. And then afternoon, you're growing older. And then you're at the end of the day, you're a kind of an ancient one, an old person. And then when you go to sleep that night, then think that this is parallel to death. I'll try that some days. It's very interesting way of relating to the day and how it parallels our span of life. And it's very fortifying for your practice, for your mind. Then 97. The actions of the Bodhisattva are unbounded, so the teachings say. In other words, the six paramitas, these 4 ways of gathering others and so forth. Of course, and Shantideva, like the beauty of the Bodhicharyavatara is that Shantideva took all the teachings. He knew all the sutras. He knew all the sutras that existed, which actually were more than we have now. There was a big, how do we say, a forceful, there was a big chop, a lot of the teachings that that didn't survive the invasions by particularly the 2 prevailing other fanatical religions in India. And all, of course, Shantideva was at Nalanda, and all of the texts at Nalanda did not get into Tibet. So the teachings say. So these, but Shantideva, he essentialized the Bodhisattva teachings into these 10 chapters. So of all these teachings, until the goal is one, in other words, from being a baby bodhisattva, a complete novice, up until Buddhahood, up until being let's say up until being a bodhisattva in the true sense of the word, like embrace the practices that purify your mind, particularly find and use those practices that purify your mind, and basically mind training, and train your mind in the practices until your mind has has genuine signs of purification, of being purified. So until your mind is purified, then continue doing mind training to purify it. It's the most profound, not the root of impurity is self-clinging. And so mind training is, all the teachings of mind training are to uproot, to turn the tables on the complete predictability of self-clinging originated actions. Say no more. Then 98, reciting. Okay, so when we do recognize that we have failed in keeping one of the downfalls, or when we have the fault of a downfall, a root downfall, one of the root downfalls, then he says here, reciting thrice by day and thrice by night, the sutra on the sutra in the three sections. So we should recite this sutra of Pungpo Sum. It's a very famous, very commonly practiced sutra. So between these two, when we have broken one of the root, not broken it down, when we've committed, when we've committed one of the root downfalls, then we need to, as soon as we possibly can, confess it, own up, confess it by seeing its outcomes being so negative. So feeling the sorrow and the remorse for having fallen down on our bodhisattva precept, bodhicitta precept, then we should confess it, purify it through some means, and then retake. Then again with a good heart, and then just recite and retake the bodhisattva vow again, as it's taught in particularly here in the third chapter, the end of the third chapter that we went through. So that when these root downfalls are need to be dealt with like that. It's just like a butter lamp. When a butter lamp goes out, as soon as a butter lamp consumes all the oil or the butter, it's very easy to clean it. All you have to do is just clean it out with a dry rag. But if you wait, then that gets into it. It becomes a big mess. You have to deal with the wick. You have to deal with melting, the heating up or boiling the butter lamps, and then wiping it out. And it's always a much more elaborate process. So the sooner we pull ourselves together when we have violated one of the root, or when we have performed one of the root downfall, when we violated our bodhicitta commitment, basically. Then for other faults, for the less damaging faults, then we can recite this sutra in 3 sections, or what we do at Chaktagompa and some traditions is the Immaculate Confession from another tantra. The sutra in the Pungbo Sum, the sutra in 3 sections, is very popular in the new school, in the Nyingma, Karju, Sakya, Geluk, and they usually memorize it and then they do it through prostrations, reciting. It's basically you're calling out the names of the 33 confessional Buddhas, visualizing them in front of you, and then there's a section on rejoicing, a wonderful section on rejoicing and dedication. Those are the 3 sections that are talked about there. So I'm sure if you're interested in that, you can find. I'm sure there's many translations of it. Let's see, reciting the sutra, the 3 seconds, relying on the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas, purify the rest of your transgressions. Okay, yeah, the rest meaning the other faults, not the root downfalls. We need to just really go for the big remediation, and so purify the rest of your transgressions with a remedy such as practicing this text. Commentary says, the practicing, putting the various teachings in this text into practice is the way that mind becomes purified, is the lessening and lessening of self-clinging. In the context of the Bodhisattva Pitaka, in the context of the Bodhicitta training, the root of all suffering is self-clinging. In another point of view, maybe more in a philosophical way, the root of all suffering is ignorance. But in bodhicitta, it's called ignorance, it's called self-clinging. That's a synonym, a functional synonym for ignorance. Ignorance. So in the bodhicitta training, we make others more important than the self, right? And that is the antidote to self-clinging. Okay, then 99, wherever and whenever and whatever you are doing, for your sake or the sake of others, implement with diligence the teachings given for that situation. So, according to Buddha's teachings, teachings on body, teachings on speech, or on behavior, on speech and mental, there's always a remedy. And just here, and just in this chapter alone, we just finished talking about, or this chapter, about when you walk. The teachings, Shantideva, again, consolidated all the teachings into a few verses on how you should walk. Remember? And how you should sit with mindfulness and introspection. And how, when you're alone in the mountain retreat, how you should be. And how you eat, gobbling, not gobbling, and so forth. All, not, this isn't just conduct. These are guidelines for mindfulness and introspection, and how we should speak, and even when we see others, how we should look at others, taught there last time. And of course, then here how we sleep, how we lay down to sleep. So that's what it means. Wherever, whenever, whatever you're doing, implement with diligence. Joy with diligence means joy and virtue. So implement them with this joyful enthusiasm, whatever situation is appropriate. And then he says, there is indeed no field of knowledge that the Buddha's offspring should not learn. Here, of course, in the traditional Buddhist society, traditional Buddhist knowledge, field of knowledge, there were the what are called the 5 major knowledges, which is the sort of the arts and crafts and medicine, grammar, logic, and Dharma. And when if you know, in the Tibetan tradition, Khenpos and geshes who were trained over many years, they all have knowledge of these 5 major branches of knowledge to some extent. Some of them become, artists primarily, or some of them become medical doctors, or some of them become Dharma teachers or logicians, or their composition. Did I say composition? Yeah, composition is one. And then there's the minor fields of knowledge of kind of like astrology and other ones. I'm completely unlearned in these, but I did learn to cook a little bit, which is a good. Cooking wasn't part of their curriculum, I've noticed. I think because they had to cook while they were learning things. Yeah. So we should be interested in things. Particularly now, we should know how to set up sound systems, how to edit videos, how to create web pages, and so on and so forth. Yeah, building stupas was one of the, not architect, engineering, and all these kind of things. So we should be enthusiastic about becoming a functional participant in a culture as a bodhisattva, in training. For those who are well versed in all these ways, that is to say, all these ways means mindfulness and introspection. All these ways of practicing carefulness, mindfulness, and introspection. There is no action destitute of merit. So whatever a person who has taken the Bodhisattva vow, whatever you do, whatever you undertake, with carefulness, mindfulness, and introspection, will have merit, will be virtuous. Even like it's taught, how even if you lift and lower your hand, and even non-virtuous actions will be virtuous if they are driven by bodhicitta and accompanied by mindfulness and introspection. Non-virtue or neutral acts. 101. Directly then or indirectly do nothing that is not for others' sake. So always have this bodhicitta intention, or bodhicitta in aspiration, and bodhicitta and in bodhicitta in intention, engaging bodhicitta. But mostly this aspiration bodhicitta we should focus on, because aspiration bodhicitta, which is this wish, may all beings have happiness and the cause of happiness and the the constant happiness of awakening. That kind of aspiration bodhicitta. Because engaging in bodhisattva conduct, like generosity and these disciplines and so forth, are not really bodhisattva conduct if they're not grounded in this aspiration bodhicitta. There's generosity, and then there is training in the paramita of generosity. And they're not, the results are not the same. So just being generous and helpful is not necessarily bodhisattva conduct. It's not bodhisattva conduct unless it is accompanied by and supported by and kind of like, I guess, like say, it's like you can get a car to move if you go downhill, or you get a car to move by putting gas in it and stepping on the accelerator. It might look like there's cars moving in both instances, but just going down a hill is very, bodhicitta is like the gas of the car to make it go. So this is this aspiration bodhicitta. Then our generosity links up with this aspiration bodhicitta and becomes engaging bodhicitta. Directly means, like say, being, giving direct generosity. Say direct generosity is giving material substances with this bodhicitta, and giving the Dharma, or giving protection. These three aspects of generosity. That's a direct acting for the welfare of others, for others' sake. And indirectly is, say, when we are in retreat, or when we are doing our sadhana practice, some puja practice, or meditating. Of course, that is, again, we develop bodhicitta at the outset, and then dedicate the merit at the conclusion. Like it says here, do nothing that is not for others' sake, and solely with their welfare dedicate and dedicate and make aspirations accompany every action to the gaining of enlightenment. In all acts, you can dedicate your own actions, you can dedicate the actions of others, you can dedicate the actions of all the previous lifetimes of Buddha Shakyamuni, all the actions of bodhisattvas, all the actions of future Buddhas, all the virtues of future bodhisattvas. You can dedicate all your future actions, all your past good actions. We can dedicate that for the welfare of all beings and their gaining of awakening. Then, okay. Never, at the cost of life or limb, forsake your virtuous friend, your teacher, learned in the doctrine of the Mahayana, supreme in Bodhisattva discipline. So here, Shantideva is again bringing up the importance of having a what's called a spiritual friend. A spiritual friend is a Mahayana term for your teacher. In Hinayana, in the basic Buddhist level, your teacher is called elder. The elder. You would consult with your elder, with an elder in the order of your ordination or something like that. And in the Mahayana, they're called Gewe Shenyan, means a virtuous friend. And of course, in the Vajrayana, of course, then that individual is considered to be the guru. So in the Mahayana, then your virtuous friend has a more, not just, I don't mean sort of to be kind of diminished, but it's more chatty, it's more, there's more sense of appreciating the flaws and how to reduce flaws, how to increase your potential, and almost, it's not exactly like therapy, but kind of along those lines, but it's certainly not to become well adjusted to the world. It's actually to become liberated from mundane values. And so your teacher is a support for your path of bodhicitta that leads to bodhisattva accomplishment. And bodhisattva accomplishments means recognizing the absolute nature of your own mind. At that point, when that becomes a genuine recognition, then you have entered into the first stage of what would be called bodhisattva in the true sense of the word. Before that, you are, of course, when we took the bodhisattva vow in the beginning here, then by definition, legally, you could be called a bodhisattva. But it's like an infant is, no, that doesn't work, actually. Yeah, just by taking the vow of bodhisattva, you are in fact a bodhisattva, but in the true sense of the word, you don't pass into the actual path of seeing, what's called the path of seeing, which is the third of the 5 paths, until you have this recognition of mind's nature. Before that, then, a bodhisattva engages in the preparatory phases of the training, and then reaches the stage where they become, it's called the path of joining. And it's this path where all the preparatory mind training stages become joined to this path of seeing, this recognition, in a genuine sense, in a authentic recognition. And so your teacher is who we rely on for that process to occur successfully. And so we should always mentally, verbally, and physically, or through behavior, always have respect for them, whether they're close to you or whether they're distant. And of course, in the Vajrayana, I'm not getting so much into that, but just sometimes they double up, and your teacher you have a teacher who fills many categories of in your training, but of course in the so you should learn how to practice, how to engage in the practice of respecting the teacher. And we have, of course, Words of My Perfect Teacher very much has a whole chapter on that, which is very important that we know it very well. Then we shouldn't go against the teacher. Shouldn't go against the words of the teacher. We should always have a teacher. Even great bodhisattvas always have a teacher. And there are many bodhisattvas in the sutras. We can read how many bodhisattvas have hundreds of teachers that are other bodhisattvas and other Buddhas too, great 8th, 9th, 10th level bodhisattvas. Even the Avalokiteshvara and Lord Tara, they have on the crown of their head Amitabha or Akshobhya, Amoghasiddhi, whoever it might be, but that's indication of even the perfectly awakened bodhisattva still takes as their spiritual guide, their spiritual inspiration, the Buddha. It's taught that if we stay with the Guru, then we develop the qualities of the Guru or with the teacher. I'll go into that one or not. Commentary, Kunzang Kumbel talks about what the word Mahayana means, yana particularly. Yana can mean the one that's transported, or it can mean the destination, or it can mean the means, the method. And when we talk about the method of which is what we're talking about here, and then there's what are called, we should know these are just kind of more another list of things. There's seven qualities that make this yana maha. Maha means great, and then yana means vehicle, and then of course vehicle means one transported, the destination, and then other different points of view of how it's used. But in speaking of Mahayana, then there are 7 ways that the Mahayana is greater than other yanas. One is in its scope, the scope of Mahayana, meaning particularly how far-reaching all of the sutras of the Mahayana are. It's a huge scope of teachings in the Mahayana. And then there are the qualities of the practices, where in the Mahayana practice is there's the great practices are ones that the greatness of the practices of Mahayana are that they combine, that they unify or integrate compassion and wisdom, or emptiness and wisdom, emptiness and compassion, or skillful means and wisdom. And in the wisdom, the greatness of Mahayana is great from the point of view of the wisdom that is developed in the at the outset in one's practice, and the basic methods of the teachings of Buddha that just ensure one's own liberation from samsara. So in that sense, then the scope is just based on one person experiencing freedom from samsara, and that the wisdom there is just in the realization of non-self of the individual through the taking of refuge and the practice of shamat, of calm abiding and insight. One comes to realize the lack of self, and that's the liberation there. In Mahayana, it's the wisdom is, it's called the twofold wisdom of realizing fully the non-self of the individual, and also the vast non-self of phenomena, the non-self of all phenomena, which is characteristic of the Mahayana. Diligence is Maha, the quality of the superiority of the diligence of Mahayana is that one undertakes the training of the Bodhisattva for 3 immeasurable kalpas. So the diligence matches that. With great diligence. And the skill and means, all the different methods of mind training and bodhicitta training, and all of the prajna paramita teachings are the part of the vast skillful means. The vast skillful means and deep skillful means. Vast and deep. And then the last 2 are the attainment of a complete unsurpassable enlightenment is transcends, or is greater than that of the arhat. Arhat is considered to be the freedom from samsara, and all of our kleshas, all the afflictions have basically dried up from lack of use, lack of expressing themselves. They become uprooted, and one attains the level of the arhat in that life, and then they become an arhat at death. They become absorbed in a state of the nirvana of an arhat. That's why I say arhat is with residue, which means you attain that state of the arhat while you're still alive, and then at death you become an arhat without residue. There's no body anymore. Also, there is no impulse, no Bodhisattva a bodhisattva still has the juice to be reborn in samsara. They can be reborn in the Pure Land and various Pure Lands, and then from there, with all the qualities acquired or developed in the Pure Lands, then they can act in commensurate beneficial ways and continue in that way until samsara is empty of sentient beings. And so that kind of attainment is the attainment of the Bodhisattva, of the Mahayana. And then enlightened deeds. Having attained enlightenment, like when you attain an arhat, then you're done. It's just like a flame of a candle. When you blow it out, it's over. There's no more cause for it to burn. That's the nirvana of the arhat. In the Mahayana, enlightenment in the Mahayana means that the Buddha continues with vast activities for the sake of sentient beings. Even one for Arhat, I remember just to give you an idea, there's one because speaking about the Pure Lands, where we can take rebirth from this life, if we've done a certain amount of work, and then there we can acquire many sublime qualities and powerful ways to enter into the lives, enter into samsara, and benefit, bring them to awakening. But for an arhat, or into samsara. So there's one Pure Land. I'm losing. I don't have a good memory anymore, but that was created for arhats to go. Where there's just is some. I don't know why I brought that up. But this is just a Mahayana is amazing. It's amazing when you consider the scope of the Mahayana and what it how it contributes to the life of all sentient beings, and also to the bodhisattva, to the life of the bodhisattva. Okay, then I'm going to continue with 103. Learn how, again, now he's again talking about the guru, or the master, the teacher. Learn how to attend upon your guru as described in Sri Sambhava's life. This and other teachings of the Buddha you should understand by reading in the sutras. So now Shantideva is saying, okay, like I'm just giving you the kernel of these teachings. You really need to consult the sutras. Sri Sambhava was a guru who was served by the Sudana. And so in that sutra, he taught, and in other sutras that describe how you should serve your teacher, what to do and what to avoid to do is taught. And so these we need to understand And again, we have our own, we shouldn't feel limited by our language or by our library of translated works. There's plenty of things we can learn from what we've got. Even when you look at Words of My Perfect Teacher on how to analyze a teacher, how to analyze the teacher at the beginning, and then how to serve the teacher in the middle, and then how to take on the qualities of the teacher and at the end. These are the ways to understand that are taught in the sutras. Indeed, within these sutras, all the practices are found, all the bodhisattva precepts, all the precepts of the bodhisattva are found in the sutras. Therefore, read and study them. And then he mentions particularly here, the Sutra of the Essence of the Sky is the text that should be studied first, Akashagarbha Sutra. And we should study that first because it gives it explains what the downfalls are, what the 18 root downfalls are. If we don't know what the 18 root downfalls are, then how will we know? And so he taught. I mentioned them earlier in the fourth chapter on carefulness, but they are. I think this was maybe the first sutra that these root downfalls were consolidated into a system like that. All that must be practiced constantly is clearly and extensively explained within the digest of all disciplines. So this is something you should read repeatedly. From time to time, for sake of brevity, consult the digest of the sutras, and those two works peruse with diligence that noble Nagarjuna has composed. So these two citations of digest of all disciplines, the Shikshu Samuchaya and the Sutra Samuchaya, the digest of the sutra. When Shantideva taught this, as we mentioned in the very first teaching a year or so ago, I forget when we started it. What was I going to say? After when Shantideva disappeared during the 9th chapter teachings, then they went to check with him about, because there were different opinions or different opinions about the number of chapters and so forth, and they went to search all over India for him, for Shantideva, to clarify the discrepancies that were found. And one of the things that they had no idea what was these two texts. And so he told them, well, these two you can find in my cell at Nalanda, up above the doorway. I tucked them there. They were his original composition. And so one of them, the first one there, the digest of all discipline, the Shiksha Samuchaya, still exists. It's in the Tenjur. It's in the Shastras. It's in the volumes of those Shastras, and it condenses it condenses the description of Bodhisattva activities by Shantideva. He condenses all the activities of the Bodhisattva from the sutras. And the other one, the digest of the sutras, is that's lost. And then there are Nagarjuna. Also, he composed two texts, and One is called a Shiksha Samuchaya, and the other is called the Sutra Samuchaya. And they have the same name, but they're different. They're by Nagarjuna. Nagarjuna was, I don't know, a few hundred years earlier than Shantideva. But let's see if I get this right. Nagarjuna's Sutra Samuchaya, which Shantideva's text by the same name is lost, but Nagarjuna's Sutra Samuchaya exists. That's in the Tenja, in the Shastra collection. But Nagarjuna's Shiksha Samuchaya is missing. So it's just the opposite ones. Nagarjuna's ones missing than Shantideva's. Whatever in these works was not prescribed, be sure to undertake and implement. So a bodhisattva should undertake these, what is taught in these texts, and of what to avoid and what to adopt. That's the theme of practicing Buddhism. We need to learn what to avoid and what to adopt and implement. And what you find enjoined there, perfectly fulfill, and so protect the minds of worldly beings. So what we find there are the precepts. What's enjoined there, that means we should study and learn the precepts of the bodhicitta training and fulfill them perfectly. And so protect the minds of worldly beings, particularly here in this context. We should protect beings from loss of confidence in bodhicitta, as we mentioned just previously, not to undermine people's path by causing them to lose confidence. And so in this particular context, in these two chapters, carefulness and introspection, including mindfulness, the object of our care, the object of our mindfulness, and the object of our introspection are the precepts. It's not like mindfulness of like staring at a picture of the Buddha, or staring at your breath with your mind and being mindful of that and so forth. That's not the object. Here, the object has to do with learning and fusing your mind to the accomplishment of the precepts of bodhicitta. And so we do that. We learn, reflect, and memorize, or do whatever we need to do to know what the precepts of bodhicitta are, and for the sake of beings, act. Be a source of joy for others. Yeah. So then, these last two verses are a summary. It sums up this chapter, where he says, examining again and again and yet again, the state and actions of your body and your mind. This alone defines in brief the maintenance of watchful introspection. In other words, introspection is the practice of examining, not just once, but many times, again and again, maybe hundreds of times or more a day, what your mind is doing, what your speech is doing, what your body is doing. Always be aware of your body, of your speech, and of your mind. and discover if it's positive, or through introspection, we can discover, is my mind being positive? Is it being negative? Is it just abiding or being neutral? And then with a very alert, kind of alert application, either adopt what's positive and cause it to grow, cause it to flourish and expand, or reject it, knowing that it is an affliction, a flaw in our bodhisattva practice, our bodhicitta practice. So that's 108 is, this kind of always being aware of how your body is, how your mind is, and how your speech is. But all this, in other words, all this introspection towards my body, speech, and mind and their actions must be acted out in truth, for what is to be gained by mouthing syllables. So we can't just, we should read this text silently. It's taught here at Patrul Rinpoche, taught we should read it to ourselves and study it, and we should read it out loud. And mostly, though, not mostly, but here it says, what's to be gained by just reciting it out loud? We need to also strive to implement its intended meaning, not just parrot it, not just parrot the text. What invalid was ever helped by merely reading in the doctor's treatises, or just listening to the doctor, whoever got cured just by listening to the doctor talk about how this medicine is so great and that therapy is so good and so forth. But we need to help. Help only comes by taking the medication and following the cure, following the protocol, the therapy of the healing. In this Sri Sambhava's life, in that sutra, that's kind of the lines drawn from that are, we should regard the teacher as a doctor, the Dharma as a medicine, and oneself as the patient, as the sick one. And then join them. That's how you should see ourselves. And so that means we have to take the medication, because that's the only way that we will achieve our heart's wish, our heart's desire to benefit beings in the most long-term effective way. Okay, so that brings us to the end of that chapter. So again, we should take, it's presented as just this long verse, and I'm sure that in Sanskrit it was very beautiful, and in Tibetan it's very beautiful, and this version that I've been using I find to be very beautiful. I like old-fashioned kinds of compositions like this. The versification and things, but it's just presented as a very long poem, you could say. But as we see from the commentary, it actually is broken up into practice components. And so as you review and study this, as people, many people have been taking this as their main Dharma practice. And certainly there's reason to, it's well known that taking the Bodhicharyavatara as one's main practice will be the ideal basis for entering into the Vajrayana practice in a pure and authentic way, not just because of some, maybe we have the karma for the exotic, but to really approach it in the most honest and genuine way is by taking the teachings of the way of the Bodhisattva to heart. Again, not just once and become, like for me, I just go around saying how great the book is, but to be somebody who really takes it and really integrates it into all their actions, all their heart practice. Okay.